Have I ever told you that I don't do the whole online dating thing? No? I've never told. How has that never come up when we've spoken before? Oh, you know what it is? It's probably because you and I are meeting right now for the first time in this instance right here. That's probably what it is. But stay with me, there's a good story, just trust me. I've only ever been on one online date in my entire life, and that's not because I found love at first sight. That fateful night, I showed up to the restaurant at 6:30 p.m., met my date. By 7 p.m., they were finishing their fourth margarita and gesturing for the check, somewhat obnoxiously. And when they got the check, they slid it across the table for me to pay. I was baffled. But they said they had another date to get to. But it was really nice meeting me, and we should do this again sometime. In that one fell swoop, my trust in online dating was shattered completely. And trust, as we all know, is a delicate thing, especially when it's established online. What does it mean to trust somebody online? Well, it means you think that they're reliable and that they're true, or you believe that there's strength in that person's character. Now extend that to their digital perception, and that's even harder to cultivate when it's through a computer screen. Trust, faith, confidence, dependence, all built and shattered in largely the same way. And although we've all heard the horror stories of what can happen if you put your trust in the wrong person online or the wrong company online, I don't think that's led to trust dwindling at all. I think what it's done is it's led to trust shifting away from mega influencers, away from mega corporations, and instead, it's come closer to home, to real people talking to real people. But let's take a step back. How did we even get here? Well, I learned 3 factors that destroy trust the hard way when I was a roving reporter down at CES. That's the Consumer Electronics Show. If you've never been there before, it's crazy. It's where tens of thousands of tech aficionados, they descend on Sin City, Las Vegas, right? And they bring all of their geeky gadgets and not nearly enough deodorant. Whew. Speaking from experience. And there they are to learn about the latest and greatest in tech for the coming year. It was there that I met a man named Paul. And Paul's notable because he holds the record of having said to me the single most hurtful thing I've ever heard in my professional life. Paul said I shouldn't have a job. Ouch, right? And it wasn't that Paul thought ill of my experience or that he could do it better in any way. Paul just fundamentally believed my involvement down at CES, what I was doing there, spreading online interaction through social media, yeah, that could do nothing for brands but breed bad press. And that is why Paul was proud to tell me his brand, no, they were nowhere to be found online. So I listened to Paul, but I was curious. So after he was done, we huddled around the iPad and we typed in his brand name. And you know what? He was right about one thing. There were no owned properties that came up. But what happens when you type something into Google? Does nothing come up, or do hundreds of millions of things come up in a fraction of a second? And there were 3 things that came up that straight up mortified him, and as I said, destroyed trust online. Number 1, fake news. We all knew it was coming. And by doing just a little bit of digging, we saw that the fake news online was actually being published by smaller players in Paul's industry. They were trying to level the playing field. And as we've already said, Paul didn't have any type of online persona, so he wasn't there to defend himself. Number 2, there was essentially all of this misinformation that had risen up the search aggregators. And how did that happen? Well, it was through social amplification. Think about that. The articles that are being shared rampantly, they had no validity, just a little bit of fact-checking, and they were debunked. And then lastly, probably the most sad thing to anybody who is customer service-centric in this room or in the world, there were genuine questions from would-be customers, people who wanted to be in business with Paul, but there was no one for them to go to because there was no online community for his brand. As I said, he was straight up mortified when he saw these 3 things. Now you might be thinking, that's all good, Adam, but that's anecdotal. Well, let's take a step back and look at it on a macro scale. In North American and European markets, social e-commerce has famously failed, particularly in the last year. Meta, for example, has shut down live shopping on Facebook and product tagging on Instagram. TikTok as well stalled in 2022, delaying their live shopping rollout. Why is that? Well, according to a recent survey of over 10,000 consumers, it's because of a lack of trust. A lack of trust in vendors, a lack of trust in the social platforms that we operate on. We don't believe that the goods and services that we're transacting for are genuine because we don't believe that the interactions that they stem from are genuine. And if all of this is what's swirling around our heads, surely there had to be a better way. Well, there was, and that's what led to this shift of trust. Now you might be thinking, how do we even know where it shifted, who it shifted to? Well, in order to answer that, we needn't look any further than the evolution of the trust experience at Best Buy. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, how did you shop at Best Buy? Well, you walked in the front doors, you located the department overhead that you wanted to transact at, you then walked up and probably right in front of the product that you intended to buy, and then almost every single one of us did the exact same thing. What did we do? Our head went on a swivel to find the person in the blue shirt. Why did we do that? Well, because 20 years ago, that's where the trust was housed. That's where the expertise would reside. And that person, whether they had been working at Best Buy for 10 minutes or 10 years, got the benefit of the doubt. They got to influence tens, if not hundreds, of purchase decisions every single day, even if they didn't know more than the person that was standing immediately to the left or the right of them. Pretty crazy, right? Fast forward to today. How do you shop at Best Buy? Well, actually, don't answer that, because I'm pretty sure half the room would just shout out, online, and that's not why we're here. For the purpose of apples to apples, let's assume you still go in store. Well, you'd still walk through those front doors. You'd still locate the department overhead that you want to shop at. You'd still walk up to the product that you want to buy, but your head no longer goes on a swivel. This is the shift. Your head now goes down. It goes into your smartphone. Why? Because today, that is where the trust is housed. That is where the expertise resides. When we think about the shift in trusted voices, particularly in the last decade or so, trust has gone from outside of our immediate networks to inside of our immediate networks. We trust our personal experiences, and in the absence of our personal experiences, we trust the personal experiences of people that we know, testimonials. And now more than ever, we are very, very wary of anybody who is overt about the fact that they may have a sales incentive. But there's another way that trust has shifted in terms of our voices, and it's one of my favorite areas to work in and talk about, which is, of course, the influencers. Does anybody know this story? It's one of my favorites. This is Ariana Renee at Ari. She catapulted to stardom a few years ago, amassing 2.6 million followers, all before she could legally buy a beer in her home state. And the crazy thing about that is, from working in the industry, I know one thing is true. When you hit that threshold of fans, that's when the brand partnerships start to come in, okay? And she was no different. She got hollered at by a lot of different people, one of which was a clothing brand. And they said, listen, we want to be in the Ariana business. We want to give you your own clothing line. It's going to be fashionable. It's called Era. It's going to be awesome. All we need to do to get started is something very modest in scope. It's called an initial run. So all we need you to do is sell 36 shirts. And she thought, okay, that's pretty good. So she blasted it out to her family, to her followers, to her friends, and guess what? She couldn't do it. And at that point, every marketer the world over worth a damn turned to their colleagues and they said, what is the value of 2.6 million followers if you can't compel your audience to buy 36 of something? More important, this influencer misstep, it gave way to a shift in trusted voices, the emergence of the micro-influencer model. These are people who are highly, highly influential, but on a much smaller scale. A micro or a nano influencer, when they talk, people listen, absolutely. They don't have the millions of followers, but what they do have is our trust stemming from fewer degrees of separation. When a micro influencer activates, it's typically on a local or a niche basis, which also makes the whole experience feel more intimate. When a micro influencer engages you in conversation, a real person listens. More importantly, when a real person talks, a micro-influencer responds. And in doing that, the foundation of trust has quickly become authentic conversation. Now you might be thinking, that's all well and good, but I'm trying to deepen a relationship. I'm trying to make a sale. Surely there's got to be more to this, and absolutely there is. And to illustrate how we bring this home, there's no better story than that of Marcus Sheridan. Marcus started his own pool company called River Pools in 2001. And he was doing really well for a little while. Up until 2008, that's when the financial crisis hit. And don't get me wrong, economic downturn, it was a bad day for everybody, but it was an especially bad day for pool guys. On October 10th alone, Marcus lost 5 major client deposits. If we fast forward just a few short months to January of 2009, when the phone rang, it was no longer clients calling to cancel their deposits, it was the bank calling to discuss bankruptcy. If Marcus took that out, he would lose his home. If Marcus filed for bankruptcy, his 16 employees, they would lose their homes. And so Marcus decided to essentially approach this business conundrum from the perspective of trust. Marcus sought out and then answered every single one of the world's internet pool questions, even the ones that were really, really hard and required transparency around price. And you know what? In doing so, he did create this awesome repository of vlogs and blogs on his website that his employees could use as a catalyst for conversation with would-be customers. And he did, in doing so, manage to essentially become the world's most searched for pool company. And he did, as a matter of fact, also manage to save his business. Now, some pundits analyze the case of Marcus Sheridan, and they argue that what he implemented was a strategy whereby he activated a roster of content creators. I would argue what Marcus was doing was cultivating his own internal roster of trust creators. Because in the absence of those influencers, who we've already established we don't trust the same way we used to, who can you go to as a business owner, as a company, to know that your voice is going to be nurtured, it's going to be cared for, as much as you yourself were the one having the conversation? Well, as in Marcus's case, it was pretty simple. It was right under his nose, the employees. And the facts on employee advocacy speak for themselves. We as individuals, regardless of where we work and what capacity, we have the power. Our messages are being reshared at a rate of 24 times that of the big faceless entity. They're being discussed at a rate of 8x that of the big corporate brand. And you know what? Collectively, whether you're in this room or you're watching this online, we have about 10x the audience of the big corporate accounts. So in the absence of bringing on influencers that we don't trust the same way, we are finding success essentially cultivating our own from within. And I gotta say, I'm so here for it. Now you might be saying, back in my day, we used to be able to go brand to consumer, consumer to brand. I wanna go back to that. How do I go back to that as soon as possible, Adam? And to that I say, we're never going back. And here's how I know. 2 stats that absolutely shattered my world. Number 1, in a recent study by NYU, 77% of respondents basically said the single most important group that they belong to in this world is a group that exists online. We couple that with a study that was done by Squarespace recently, where they looked at the generational cohorts a little bit more. They looked at millennials, they looked at Gen Z, and they asked them, they said, listen, first impressions, where is it most important to make that first impression? And for 60% of millennials and Gen Z, do you know what they said? It's more important to make it online than it is in person. That same study dug a little bit deeper on Gen Z, you know, the emergent cohort, the one that's entering the workforce in droves right now, and they asked them a very, very simple question. They said, what is the single most memorable moment in your life? And for so many of them, do you know what they said? They chose a moment that exists online as opposed to in person. If all of these stats are meant to be believed, trust online is very quickly becoming trust, period. So no. It's not the advent of fake news. It's not social amplification leading to us spreading misinformation. It's not even when we don't answer questions that's leading to the dwindling of trust. It's leading to the shifting of trust away from mega corporations, away from those influencers, and it's coming closer to home, to real people engaging in real conversations with other real people in a growing creator economy on established communities. Now, you might think that some of these stats and tables and things like that are not really things that you believe. Well, if that's the case, I'm now going to bust out my most irrefutable fact of the entire day. And as we all know, irrefutable facts are housed in your Instagram DMs. We established at the start of this talk that I didn't go on online dates because I didn't trust anybody that I didn't know. Then one day I got this message. It came from someone within my network, someone I went to school with, a community that I already belonged to. There were fewer degrees of separation between she and I. And you know what? That gave me faith. That gave me faith when she asked me to go on a blind date with her friend. She essentially gave me that trust that I was not able to have before. Because at the end of the day, if I was left after this date in 30 minutes and 4 margaritas deep with the bill, there was someone to hold accountable. So yeah, I took the date. I took the date. Now, I'm not really one to kiss and tell. So when I tell you that this date went really, really well, you'll just have to trust me. Thank you very, very much.